So we decided to start despite the fact that some different times and different agendas occur. Nevertheless, people will join the latest in 10 minutes. So I'm very glad that we have the possibility in the second panel of today to discuss the current economic situation and try to have an outlook, which is not, I guess, an easy task, and it didn't become easier when you look back to the previous Minsk forums. But nevertheless, we try to find some ideas or thoughts from the speakers, which are hereby welcome very much on the panel. From my far right, it's Uladzimir from iSANS, specialist on energy security. So welcome, Uladzimir. Second one is Sierz Naurodski, Vice President and Country Manager for Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia at ABBA. It's the Association of the Belarusian Business Abroad. Welcome on the panel. Then we have, it's not according to what I see here in the back. Then we have Robert Kirchner, Deputy Head of the German Economic Team, with a special expertise, among others, on Belarus. Welcome, Robert. And last but not least, Lvovskiy. He's the academic director of BEROC, a well-known economic think tank from Belarus still, I guess it's correct, Lev. Yeah. From Belarus in Lithuania, but we still say from Belarus. We thought about to structure our discussion here, our panel here, in three parts. The one, we will focus on internal economic developments. In the second round, we will discuss a bit more the international relations and proceedings. And in the third part, we would like to open the floor to the audience and looking forward to receive questions from you and discussing what is interesting for you. But first of all, I would like to take the floor, like to ask Robert Kirchner to take the floor, to start with an introduction or with an overview on the macroeconomic situation in Belarus, on the trends, Robert, and maybe you can share what you at the German Economic Team, Belarus, are doing, since I know that you just reshaped, of course, your activities a bit.
Yes, thank you very much, Stefan, for the question, and I'm glad to be here at the Minsk Forum, as I have always been also in previous years. It's always a very great opportunity to discuss and see what's going on, which is obviously in the current situation much more tricky and difficult than before in economic terms. And that's probably my first remark, that we cannot assess the economic performance of Belarus to the same extent that we could have done it some years ago, because the authorities have restricted access to certain kinds of economic data in the trade sphere and in the fiscal sphere as well. So it is not the same as it used to be, which makes it harder to assess economic performance, but which makes it also more important to have people specialized in doing that. And here, colleagues from BEROC obviously also should be mentioned. So the job is now much more important than it was before because of this obvious lack. Still, from what we have available in terms of economic data, we can see that definitely the economy was hit very hard last year due to the sanctions, which have been introduced already before, but then also last year. So there have been several waves of sanctions, economic sanctions, financial sanctions, also the loss of Ukraine. That was a main trade partner. It was a loss basically overnight. They are not trading anymore due to the political situation, has really left its marks on economic performance, almost 5% decline in GDP last year. I think that was the worst recession since the 90s. Yeah, so a really very, very difficult situation. Still this year, we are observing economic recovery. I think we have data now for the first 10 months of the year, and growth is 3.8%. So it has not really caught up to what was lost last year, but still we are seeing that the economic situation has gradually improved over the months. Why is that? I mean, we have seen in the manufacturing, industrial production, we have seen a gradual revival of activities there. Belarus again is also getting cheap oil from Russia, which is processing and then exporting through some shady or and not very transparent deals to other countries, not to the previous destinations like in the EU or also to Ukraine. That's not possible, but they are trying to circumvent it with the help of Russia to other markets. We have seen an increase in real incomes of the population driven by real wages, which is to some extent, I would say, also an indication that the labor market is getting more tight because many people are leaving. So that also means that the domestic labor market, there's wage pressure, but also inflation is very low. It has been administratively pushed down since last year to ridiculously low levels. I think in September it was 2%, which was even below European countries or EU countries to a large extent. It's now increasing again, but still this low inflation obviously boosted also real incomes, and that in turn boosted also real consumption. So we see also a certain revival in consumption activities, and all that helped the economy to recover to some extent. As I said, also trade recovered to some extent after a decline last year. So overall, I would say we see a recovery, and we have been doing together with BEROC also an economic outlook. We see that has already peaked. So for the whole year, we are actually less optimistic than the current figures show. So we probably see there will be a deceleration in growth. And for the next year, we see more or less a stagnation. And here in the next year, we think that the rather low production potential of Belarus is basically the kind of dominant factor behind this rather conservative outlook, where we see the economy is basically stagnating. The production potential has really decreased a lot. Also, maybe to mention the ICT sector, which was like a driving, or the IT sector, which was a driving force over the last couple of years and contributed a lot to economic growth. This has totally reversed. This, from a success story, really turned into I would say, a disaster. So the sector is shrinking with double-digit rates. Its weight in the economy is declining. People are leaving. Clients are leaving. So what has been basically, what was a success story over the last couple of years now really turned into the opposite. And we see more now that the old kind of economic forces are coming to the forefront. That's not this sort of modern, new Belarus that we have seen over the last couple of years, but now it's rather more of the state-dominated sectors that are the backbone of the economic development. Maybe that's as a very first assessment of how the situation is currently looking like.
Thank you very much, Robert, for this input. Lev, how is your, or at BEROC, the analysis, how the ruling people and forces react to these challenges, or do they just react, or what is the role? Maybe you can just describe a bit the economic policy trends, how these topics are addressed.
Thank you for invitation. I would bring such an analogy. If parents tell little children not to put their fingers into electric circuit, and then once upon a time a child puts fingers in the electric circuit and is not hit by electricity, then child thinks that it's now a cool idea, and that this child is almighty and can continue doing this. So this is somewhat what is going on among economic authorities of Belarus. Basically, most of the analytics and most of the existing economic models were predicting, first of all, much larger fall in 2022. So yes, Robert is right, 4.7% decline in 2022 was the largest decline since 1995, but the expectations were actually much worse. They didn't happen for several reasons. One of the reasons, for example, in machinery, was that European sanctions did not really work very well, and we suspect these sanctioned parts are still reaching Belarusian manufacturers through China, through third countries. Another bonus was like really fast reorientation to Russia and to Russian logistics system, which allowed to circumvent or avoid another large part of sanctions, and overall help from Russia, one of them being this oil discount that also Robert have mentioned. In the policy, in the interior economic policy, government has focused on several trends. One was like increase of state control in all the potential areas. I don't think it's a secret that current rulers of Belarus, including Lukashenko himself, they are kind of fans of a Soviet system, of command economy style. And for several years, I would say probably 2015, 2019, they were behaving like the accepted market economy, but now it's a time when they can take all these gears back to them, and that's what they did on several dimensions. So first is unprecedented system of price controls, which is supported with criminal charges. So if you've had any macroeconomic class, you probably know that if you print a lot of money, you have a lot of inflation. That's the case everywhere except modern Belarus, because with just a couple dozen of criminal charges for price increases, you can both have a huge emission of money, but also historically low inflation. They increase many taxes, create new taxes to accumulate more funds in hands of government in order to increase government investment, because there is strong belief that state investment is superior, is more efficient than private investment. They nowadays try to control even labor market, so there are new quote-unquote bright ideas of involuntary labor for college graduates. They already introduced a new law that graduates from medical universities will have to will have this involuntary work practice for 5 to 7 years. So that's an attempt to bring labor where government needs it with well, again, non-market institutions, which presumably will be helpful in a short run, where they would be able to cover a lack of doctors in rural areas, but of course will be a disaster in the long run when less people will go to medical schools or lower quality abiturients would go to medical schools. So there is much more other examples of increased state control in different areas. I would I would rather switch to this international dimension of state policies. International dimension of state policies, it's a twofold. First, the real one is, of course, a lot of attempts to get more from Russia. Lukashenko practically every 2 months have new idea of how to get new loan from Russia. He goes to Putin with this new idea. Usually Putin rejects it, but from time to time Lukashenko is successful. Like I think his latest idea was that he can take money for the construction of a second nuclear power station. I think Vladimir will tell if you ask that we right now don't need second nuclear power station, but what we need is $6 billion loan that can be associated with that, which can also produce additional GDP and additional workplaces, etc. The relationship with Russia are complicated. On the one hand, Russia is giving a lot. On the other hand, apparently not enough. ambassador to Russia, Krutoy, is always complaining that somehow that Russia allows Chinese companies to compete with Belarusian companies in the Russian market. And it's true. So for example, for machinery production, for machinery sales, Belarus pretty much lost Russian market to Chinese competitors. Yeah, but of course, Russia has some other interests, not just Belarusians. With logistics, Russia is helping a lot. So there was a concern that Belarus would just lose most of the markets because Belarus is a landlocked country. But Russia more or less opened its seaports for Belarusian produce, except probably there is still problems with potash. There are not presumably just not enough capacity for potash exports to Russian ports. There is a lot of potash is exported through Russian railroad to China, but it's much more expensive, and capacity of the railroad is much smaller than of the seaports. So that's the first general attitude, and the second, that's very small, is attempt to find other partners. There is always these speeches that, okay, we don't need Europe, we don't need Ukraine, but Russia is not our only friend. There are other countries in the world, which is technically true. There are other countries in the world, but there are not that many other countries which want to talk to Lukashenko's regime and which can produce some valuable economic gains. So this attempts to partner with different South Asian, South American and African countries continues throughout the year. Meanwhile, the largest success was with Zimbabwe. Belarus signed agreement for joint space exploration program with Zimbabwe. Belarusian women signed agreement with Zimbabwean women for presumably some Zimbabwean gender advancements. So many relationships with Zimbabwe, except economic, because Zimbabwe is unfortunately too poor to buy enough stuff from Belarus. The same goes on, like it's more or less like anecdotal and joke cases. The same goes with Nicaragua, where Nicaragua and Belarus are now presumably going to create an alternative to Panama Canal, Nicaraguan Canal, which, if you've read anything about this topic, is pretty much impossible, especially given that all Belarusian engineers are now working for Zimbabwean space program, so they're busy. Yeah, so there are not that much potential. Meanwhile, with relationship with other countries, well, of course, the main other third country is China. China indeed increased the purchase of Belarusian exports, but there was belief among Belarusian officials that China would also bring some investments and bring some technologies to Belarus, which is not happening. So China basically uses all this situation as a source of cheap resources, mainly potash and wood.
Thank you, Lev, for the overview on economic policy, and we already touched in the first panel the trips of Lukashenko to the world, and maybe Zimbabwe was one destination, maybe of a part of his team. You touched already a bit the point of energy, and here I would like to bring in Uladzimir with some comments maybe on the economic policy strategies in Belarus, but also on more focusing on the topic of energy, renewables, touched already a bit the nuclear topic. What is your analysis, your findings, how the country currently is developing in this energy and security topic?
Okay, thank you very much. Я попрошу, я хотел бы выступить на белорусской мове. І пачнем з таго, пра што ўжо закраналася, гэта пра нашу АЭС, і гэта якраз такі самы галоўны фокус, як бы самае часта абмяркоўваецца гэта пытанне. І насамрэч кардынальна мяняе энергасістэму Беларусі. Па-першае, таму што гэта станцыя на прынцыпе вельмі вялікая. З нашай структурай энергетыкі гэта прыводзіць да таго, што ў нас у некаторыя моманты з'яўляецца перавытворчасць электраэнергіі, то бок яе вырабляецца больш, чым спажываецца, яе трэба прыдумляць, куды дзець, трэба прыдумляць, чым рэзерваваць станцыю на выпадак аварыйнага спынення. Гэта ўсё патрабуе грошай. Але гэта в прынцыпе таксама зноў жа тэхнічна вырашальнае пытанне, але гэта пытанне цягнуць за сабой яшчэ цэлы шэраг другіх пытанняў. Напрыклад, менавіта АЭС з'яўляецца АЭС і вось вынікі яе працы, такія перавытворчасць электраэнергіі з'яўляюцца падставай для спынення развіцця ўзнаўляльных крыніц энергіі ў нас. То бок у сённяшнім свеце такога, напрыклад, няма ні в Расіі. В Расіі, можна казаць, няма падтрымкі, там ёсць нейкія палітычнае непрыманне ўзнаўляльных крыніц энергіі, але няма юрыдычнай забароны на будаўніцтва новых крыніц. У нас ёсць, у нас уведзены квоты, то бок это квоты не на мінімальны аб'ём укаранення, а менавіта на максімальнае, то бок больш за гэтыя квоты пабудаваць нельга, і ўжо, здаецца, 3-й год гэтыя квоты вызначаны на ўзроўні 0. То бок проста няма магчымасці юрыдычнай будаваць новыя крыніцы. І гэта вядзе зноў жа да пытанняў нашай амбітнасці і нашых дзеянняў у накірунку дэкарбанізацыі. Недавно было некалькі дзён таму на КОПе быў выступ на тэму дэкарбанізацыі і працы Беларусі ў гэтым накірунку. Вось гэта самы, здаецца мне, максімальна адметны накірунак і максімальныя відавочныя вынікі нашай працы. Другая справа, акрамя таго, напрыклад, у ўзнаўляльнай крыніцы, тое, што я казаў, гэта больш звязана з электраэнергетыкай, але ўзнаўляльныя крыніцы не развіваюцца і ў другіх галінах, напрыклад, цеплаэнергетыцы, таму што проста няма фінансавання. Фінансаваннем выкарыстання біямасы, напрыклад, доўгі час выступаў Сусветны банк. Зараз праект прытым ён быў пачаты, але ён спынены і зараз не ідзе. Бок тут праца таксама спынена. Больш за тое спыніўся прагрэс і ў павышэнні энергаэфектыўнасці. Бок зараз у нас энергаэфектыўнасць у 22-м годзе па маіх падліках, гэта зноў жа дадзеныя не публікуюцца, дакладных звестак няма, но ён прыблізна на тым самым узроўні, які быў у 2020 і прыблізна на тым самым узроўні, які быў у 2015. Бок мы ўжо маем амаль што 7 год без развіцця, без прагрэсу па энергаэфектыўнасці. І яшчэ адным накірункам развіцця, які ў Беларусі актыўна развіваўся, гэта былі нізавыя ініцыятывы. Быў шэраг НДА, якія працавалі ў сферы энергетыкі, яны працавалі ў сферы экалогіі, але ў тым ліку займаліся праблемамі забруджвання, якія звязаны з працай энергетычнай сістэмы, напрыклад. Была шырокая сетка пагаднення мэраў, у якую ўступалі гарады на ўзроўні мясцовых уладаў, і на ўзроўні мясцовых уладаў эта ініцыятыва падтрымвалася, распрацоўваліся планы дэкарбанізацыі гарадоў. Гэта ўсё спынена. І таксама спынены і нават ёсць пэўны адкат у планах па рэфармаванню самой арганізацыі энергетычнай сістэмы, то бок і ў канцэпцыі энергетычнай бяспекі запісана стварэнне рынка электраэнергіі, і праект закона распрацаваны і ляжыць на сайце Мінэнерга. І ў праграме да 2020 года была такая задача, і нават зараз яшчэ існуе ў комплексным плане задача падзелу энергасістэмы, выдзялення канкурэнтных відаў дзейнасці. А па факту мы маем тое, што першы крок, які быў, незалежны дыспетчер энергасістэмы, ён таксама перастаў быць незалежны і стаў часткай Белэнерга. Гэта вось тое, што больш-менш дэтальна, што адбываецца ў энергетыцы. А па факту можна сказаць, што штосьці спынена проста з нагоды спынення змен, таму што змены гэта нешта такое не вельмі добрае зараз адчуваецца. Штосьці спынена таму, што яно мяшае другому накірунку, напрыклад, АЭС. Штосьці спынена тому што на гэта няма грошай, як, напрыклад, развіццё біямасы. Вось тры як бы мейнстрыма, тры прычыны, ну, як бы тры галоўныя прычыны ўсіх падзей у энергетыцы Беларусі, і яны ўсе скіраваны на тое, што мы штосьці спынілі. А каб у нас павялічылася нейкае развіццё, ну, гэтага, на жаль, няма.
Thank you, Vladimir, for this insights from the energy sector. So it's interesting, not interesting, but what I find interesting is that the discussions at COP, so this group of how to use nuclear power plants as a contribution for less CO2 filled economy. There are other countries in the world thinking about how to use nuclear energy. In Germany or in some countries, even Western Europe, so we just focus on renewables. But as you look around in the EU, for example, in France or in other countries, even the Green Party is just lobbying for nuclear power plants. So let's see how this will be. This discussion will be proceeded in the international on the national scene. But maybe you would like to make a remark.
Ну, так, ну, якби, калі казаць пра выкіды парніковых газаў АТС, то, ну, такі вынік ёсць, якби, мы скарацілі, і, ну, я не ведаю, гэта дакладна немагчыма палічыць, но прыблізна там 6 мільёнаў тонн парніковага газу мы скарацілі. Ну, якби, гэта, я лічу, гэта ёсць такі пазітыўны момант. Другое пытанне, што пры гэтым мы амаль што заблакавалі, як я казаў, развіццё ўзнаўляльных крыніц. І мы так, за гэты час мы скарацілі гэтыя 6 мільёнаў. Гэта даволі прагрэсіўна, я згодны. Але не відаць перспектывы далейшага скарачэння. Тут вось чым праблема асноўная.
Yeah, I didn't want to neglect that it is maybe a problem for the energy market. If you feed in a rather small country like Belarus, such a kind of stable influx of energy to the system. Yeah, it's different, you know, different discussion of maybe CO2 and how the market and how the grids can take it.
Так, у нас энергасістэма Беларусі з пункту гледжання вось рынка электраэнергіі, яна синхронізавана з рынкам электраэнергіі Расіі, і прынцыпова, як бы, мы можам забяспечыць стабільную працу энергасістэмы просто таму, што у нас, як бы, ёсць яшчэ, ну, такая, як бы, синхронізаваная вялікая другая энергасістэма. Але пры гэтым мы не можам развіваць рынок, в тым плане мы не можам развіваць камерцыйны гандаль, таму што электраэнергія ў Расіі значна таннейшая, чым у Беларусі. І мы яе туды прадаць не зможам, а наадварот, я думаю, як бы, гэта будзе нецікава ўраду, і гэта будзе немагчыма, зноў жа, таму што у нас уласная перавытворчасць.
So we'll move a bit, thank you very much, Vladimir. We will move a bit from the energy topic to Sierz and ABBA. As we prepared the discussion, we thought about how we can split your cup of duties into a national and international sphere. And we found out that it might be an idea to talk about the question how the Belarusian business abroad is still or not involved in the national supply chains, value chains. And I guess that is an interesting question. And maybe you just can answer not only with no, but maybe give us some insights how the situation is.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Stefan. Good evening and good afternoon. Thanks for remembering about business. And I'll try to give you only good news today. So the first good news is that as far as we see, Belarusian business is already an institutional happening in the EU, which means that this business already does exist in the volume and in the quality that we can say that, look, this is Belarusian business. Because even a year ago, I wouldn't be sure about this. We didn't have enough of companies. We didn't have enough of issues even. We didn't have enough of investments and jobs created by these businesses. But today, I can be quite sure that this is the case. So Belarusian business does already exist in the EU. The second good news is that Belarusian business does some impact for the economy, which means that we are not only, I mean, all Belarusians, we're not only job takers, but we're also job creators. So if you think that there are so many Belarusians that they will take your jobs in the EU, this basically is not really true, because Belarusians already do create the jobs in the EU. I'll try to give you a few numbers on this. So as far as we know, and we are absolutely sure about this minimum number, there is at least 8,100 companies with Belarusian capital in the EU. This is big enough. It's not maybe too huge, but let's say this is big enough to say that this is already something. And these companies, as much as we know, in the EU already created at least 17,000 jobs. So 8,000 companies against 17,000 of jobs. On average, if you can calculate, it means that on average, this is more than 2 jobs per company. Yeah, this is not huge. I totally would agree with you. But taking into account that these are mostly small and micro companies, often it's up to 10 people per company. And many of these companies are not, they're registered, but they're not really working, which means they don't have even in place. Sometimes they're just on paper. I think this is enough. This is enough to tell that, look, this is already something. What we don't know is that there are many more companies, we believe so, but we cannot calculate them because of a few reasons. The first one is that they're not always Belarusian beneficiaries on paper. For instance, in every national statistics, you have to have some owner of a company, and sometimes it's beneficiary, but it's not always. Not every company, not every country gives the real beneficiary. So for instance, if this is a Cyprus company working, let's say in Estonia, then it will be a Cyprus company. Though we know that this is Belarusian, there are Belarusians who are behind of them. So this is the first problem. The second problem, as I already mentioned, is that many of the companies, they're not really active. Sometimes they are just on paper, and sometimes they're even related to the state-owned companies to avoid sanctions. So we have to be very careful to split in this, let's say, 2 branches of businesses. One of them are fair, and one of them are, let's say, kind of strange, kind of gray. And the last thing that I must tell you about Germany. Unfortunately, I don't have the statistics about Germany. How big is the Belarusian business diaspora in Germany? Unfortunately, we don't have this data. If you can share with me, I will be happy to see it. But we used proxies to see the number of companies, and let's say we think that there are not so many. We estimated up to 100 of companies with Belarusian capital in Germany. This is not enough. And Germany is just, in terms of the total number of companies, it's less than 1% in the entire EU. Less than 1%. So with this potential of German economy and with potential of German investors and of many things that you could do, we don't see this big impact for you. By the way, today we have the networking of Belarusian businesses here in Berlin in the evening. So if you are interested to join, please welcome and come say hi to me after the panel. We will, if you have anything to do with the business Belarusian, in this way we try to get known who are these businesses, what they do. In ABBA we also have some Belarusian members, some German members in the association. We know what they do, and these are quite often, they're not services companies, but they're production companies rather. They're producing real products, and they sell these products all around the globe. So this is also a good example that Belarusian business is not only a job takers, but they're job creators as well.
Thank you, Sierz. Do you see, or do you know if this, let's say 8,000 companies plus minus, have still business relations with Belarus itself, or is this really a relocation and went to Warsaw, settled down there, and just doing the business in Warsaw in the EU, or is there still, you know, existing ties to the homeland, and maybe some ideas of developments, you know, if these ties will be maintained, or will it grow, or will it diminish? So what is your if you have a reflection on this?
Yeah, it's a very good question. We have done the study of the Belarusian business in the EU recently, just in September, October. So we had a survey of the companies, and we asked them a very direct question. Are you in some way related to Belarus? And there were a few answers. So I must tell you that they're half and half. So half of the companies still have the relation to Belarus in different ways. Either they go there time to time, or they trade with Belarus, let's say, regularly or less regularly. And then the other half doesn't have nothing to do. They just relocated to the... So my assumption is that in most of the cases, the Belarusian investments that came here to the EU, they tend to be still keep the relationship with Belarus in different way. So if they can do it, they will do it. If they are, let's say, politically motivated to go away from Belarus, or they are they don't have nothing to do with Belarus, no relatives, no nobody, then they try to avoid keeping in touch with Belarus. But mostly I assume that they will be keeping in touch with Belarus.
Thank you. Just asking because in case of a political change, it might be useful and helpful if those companies maintain relations to Belarus. It's just maybe future-oriented assumption, but you need it, I guess.
Absolutely. And, you know, you cannot stop trade. To be realistic, I wouldn't ever think that Belarusian business who will come to the EU will stop dealing with Belarus. Don't expect it. Sometimes let's say in Lithuania or in Poland, we've been asked, look guys, but you are still trading with Belarus, and so what? Yes, we do trade, and this is normal. I mean, this is how economy works. You cannot stop. There are products that are not sanctioned. There's still many companies that they're coming there and back. And if this sector is clean, if this is, let's say, if companies' investment is clean, if this is our clean money, they're not related to Belarusian regime, to Lukashenko or his allies, or to Putin, then I don't see any problems with this. Because, you know, for instance, if you look at some countries around the globe, sorry, I'm going a little bit further, then for instance, some of the countries, they still have a quite big turnover with Belarus, like for instance, Poland. It's growing. It's not going down, but it's growing. Also thanks to Belarusian business in there.
It's not going too fast, Sierz, because now we're just moving very elegantly to our second topic on the panel here, on the international dimension, on sanctions, of course. And it's good that you mentioned that this developments takes place. But I maybe would like to ask Robert, coming from the macroeconomic point of view and hearing what Sierz was telling us, what is your assessment of the impact of sanctions on the external trade of Belarus, on the financial market? And maybe you can also give a remark on what Sierz told us, that the trade between Poland and Belarus is growing.
Yes, I'm happy to take that. But before, I would just go back to Uladzimir and the remark, if I may, briefly on what he said about the energy sector. Because, I mean, the energy sector is a core strategic sector of every economy, especially now worldwide that we're moving towards decarbonization. It is really a strategic sector for the transition of the economy towards basically net zero. And here, really, in this sector, you see how backward-looking Belarusian policy is. Yeah, only looking on the nuclear power station, which was not built because of decarbonization, that had other reasons. There was really no ambition in energy efficiency. There is zero on renewables, which is totally out of line internationally. So the world is moving slowly, too slow, yes, but overall into one particular direction. And with Belarus, you see the distance to this group gets larger and larger. And I think this is overall also a kind of example for how the overall economy is developing. So it's always good to have some very catchy, you know, examples, and I think the energy sector is really a good example here. Now, going back on sanctions and trade, I said in the beginning, the huge decline in GDP that we saw, I mean, we can discuss how huge. I think it was huge. It was probably less than expected, but similar things have been said about Russia. I mean, everyone also thought that Russia will sort of collapse under the sudden sanctions that had been imposed in February or March last year. In Belarus, the sanctions wave started already earlier because of the domestic situation and the hijacking of the airplane. But still, I think it was substantial. Also taking into account that actually the baseline was that the economy will be growing 2-3% of GDP in a post-COVID recovery, which would have been the sort of counterfactual, and then a 5% decline there's an even larger gap here. But the economy adjusted to these different kind of sanctions, also on financial sanctions, obviously. Banks had been sanctions, but not all of them. So there is still the possibility to channel payments in and out of the country, which then again allows for trade. It would be much more difficult, for instance, if there are no payment possibilities anymore, because all banks are basically banned, but it's not the case. So as long as this is the case, there can be physical trade, and this is also the same situation in Russia. The sovereign is obviously affected by financial sanctions. It limits its possibilities to borrow. It used to borrow a lot from capital markets, international financial markets. Cannot do it anymore. It defaulted, and now it can only go to Russia, which it does. So Russia here does help in terms of taking products from Belarus that cannot be shipped to European markets or to markets that are under sanctions. The share of the CIS countries improved, and it's mainly Russia. Went up to like 2/3 roughly on the export and the import side last year. That's a lot. So Belarus wanted to have this sort of diversified trade basket: 1/3 Russia, 1/3 EU, 1/3 rest of the world. I mean, we are very far away from that. It's 2/3 Russia and 1/3 sort of a mix of EU non-sanctioned or West non-sanctioned and other markets. But Russia helped a lot in terms of, as I said, and also as Lev said, in terms of taking some of the products themselves, in terms of helping with logistics. Also, I would say kind of smuggling or intransparently moving these goods to final destinations where we don't know where because there were no data available. And then also to some extent on the financial side to give new loans or to prolong old loans or to do some restructuring in case Belarus cannot repay them. So overall, Russian support is definitely there, and that helped obviously also to limit the damage from the sanctions. And as I said, we saw the economy recovering, growing this year again. But this, to some extent, has also come to or will come to a halt, to a pause. So we are not overly optimistic on that. Regarding EU, Poland was mentioned, right? But I mean, we are obviously following this also a lot, this indicator, and both imports, exports went down a lot after the war started. But then it started also to recover again, and especially EU exports to Belarus are again booming strongly, especially for certain categories of goods. I mean, we are always having a very clear focus on automotive exports, so cars and car parts, which have been going up tremendously to Belarus. The logical explanation would be that it has something to do with Russia, because I mean these goods have been limited in exports to Russia above certain thresholds, and now to Belarus you can export them, and then you would probably assume that they are being sold further to Russia, as the same suspicion is in other CIS countries, countries in the customs union and so on, where we have seen similar dynamics. So that is indeed an issue. Unfortunately, we don't have someone from the EU here who could maybe explain also if there are further steps will be taken to align these sanctions, because obviously it seems that this comes from the fact that these sanctions against Russia and Belarus are not aligned. But this is something probably for some sort of question for the next coming months.
So we requested colleagues from EU Commission, but due to time reasons, no one was able to join us, unfortunately, because this is, of course, an EU topic, just as a disclaimer for the audience. Thank you very much, Robert. Maybe Lvev, you can take maybe some remarks on the special sector of potassium, because it was always, you know, a kind of sensitive topic if we follow the sanctions development and history with exceptions. So what is the current status there in this specific demanded good on the global markets, and where are we in Belarus on this topic?
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting, I would say, situation. So there is a divergence of two worlds with respect to potash. There is world of real market and real demand, and there is world of, you would be surprised, Zelensky, Putin, Lukashenko, and Antonio Guterres. So these four individuals, they are in a different dimension. So what's going on with the potash market? Nothing much is going on. Prices are going back from its historic highs, which they reached like 2 months after Russian invasion to Ukraine. Now the price is stabilized around like $340 per metric ton of potassium chloride, which is around 20% higher than historic average, but nothing really substantial. We see that there are no excess demand in the world market. The main usage of potash is, of course, as a fertilizer, but there are no excess demand for grain. As we have seen during the last several months, there was even like some conflict between Polish farmers and Ukrainian farmers because grain is too cheap, actually, in the modern world. There were even official complaints of Belarusian potash producers that Canadian potash is too cheap, and Canada is dumping prices by sending cheap potash to China. Yeah, and Canada is just shipping at usual market prices, so there is no dumping. So yeah, if you just look at the market, there is nothing special. Yes, Belarus is exporting like around 30-40% less than the pre-war levels, because, as I said, it's hard with logistics. But Canada and African countries, they are compensating this deficit. But as I said, this is the first world. In the second world, there is a food crisis. It's surprising, but both Zelensky and Putin and Lukashenko and Antonio Guterres believe that there is a food crisis, that there is some, I'm not sure, imaginary or non-imaginary global south that push them and tell them that sanctions should be lifted, that there are people dying from hunger, etc. Well, again, we cannot see it in the global market, but somehow this discourse is rather successful. So there are not that many things that Lukashenko brings up, and then the General Secretary of United Nations agrees with that and pushes this topic forward. This is probably the only one. I know there were some semi-successful attempts to lift sanctions on potash during the last European Union consultations on sanctions against Belarus. Sanctions were not lifted, but at least new sanctions were not enacted, because as far as we know, yeah, there were a lot of discussions about potash, and so some countries agreed not to lift sanctions against potash in response to not adding other sanctions.
Thank you very much for this just deep dive to this interesting good and the discussions on the international scene, and thanks a lot for this insight, Lev. Maybe I come to Sierz and Vladimir again before I open or we open the floor for the audience. Sierz, you described a bit the situation of the Belarusian companies in the EU. the challenges as well. So what are your ideas within ABBA? You mentioned this network evening today here in Berlin. What your members or the companies requesting from you? What they need to be much more integrated in the structures of the EU countries, of the new environment, and what are you planning to match this demand? So maybe you can just share your strategy to grow as an institution, but also for the companies.
Thanks, Stefan. I don't want to stop much on ABBA and on the association itself. It's not the right place for this. But institutionally, what we know, there are two key things that the company normally want us and ask us to do. The first thing is networking. They're really looking at networking, and it's all kind of events that we can imagine. And we try to do this as much as we can. We try to do different forums all around the world. And next February 2024, we'll be having a new economic forum, Belarusian economic forum in Washington, D.C. This is absolutely new dimension for us, new market, let's say. There are many Belarusian investors that have been there for years, and now they are kind of institutionalized, as I mentioned already in the previous. So one thing that we need to do is to bring them together at one place once, let's say, per half of a year at least, and this is what we try to do. And not only us, but other ecosystem players as well. So this is the first thing is networking. So all kind of things that we can mesh them together. The second thing is financial problems. They ask us to help them to find finance, because normally when they come, imagine you are from Belarus and you have relocated and you try to relocate your business and you have, let's say, some money in your pocket. This is enough to open up a company and start working, doing something, let's say, open, I don't know, a car shop or some smaller services or an IT company. But to develop, you need more funds, more investment. This is what normally is the request from the company. When they first come, they do these first types of investment. Then the second step, they need much more money. On average, we know that this sum that they need is not huge. This is in between 50,000 and 100,000 euros. So for us, for any businessman, this is, you would say, no, this is something very funny number, funny investment. But you know, as far as I told you, these are micro and small companies. For them, this is the matter of survival and sometimes of going deeper into the market. So we're trying to give them this funding. We're trying to find this money and to accumulate this funding. One of our success, and I can already mention it today, is that we have we are now finalizing the talks with the European Commission, and European Commission will be opening next year the revolving investment fund for Belarusian businesses in the EU, but mostly in Poland at the first step. So the companies in Poland with Belarusian capital, with Belarusian money, with Belarusian beneficiaries will be able to come and get this money as an investment. It will not be a loan, but let's say some kind of loan. You will have to pay for it, rather in a low interest rate, not maybe even lower than on average in the market, but let's say it will be paid, but you will be able to get it. So this is we're talking about 5 million of investment from the European Commission side, and hopefully next year it will start working. And this is something that we're already doing, and this is something something tangible that you can already see and you can touch it. And we are coming back to businesses and saying them, look guys, here you go. But we're also coordinating with other companies, with other funds, with other sponsors, and try to bring it together. We will be trying to have some investor days, some knowledge days, and so on and so forth. Again, it's not only ABBA, of course, but any other players of ecosystem as well. So these are the two directions.
So Serge, how do we get more German companies involved? You mentioned the 100 companies. I know that we've been in discussions how we can grow this connection, but we found out that a lot of companies, of course, relocated to Poland, to Lithuania, but only a few or less to Germany. So that might be is connected to some internal structures here in Germany. But what can we do? I guess we can sure support your networking. But do you have any idea or fresh impulse what we could do to make Germany more attractive for entrepreneurs or companies from Belarus?
I'm afraid the answer for this question is rather political. The first thing you have to do is to give the residence permits to those who would like to do business. Because on the visa, if you have a German visa, it's impossible to come here to open up an account, a business account, or even if you will be able to start a company, let's say with a German partner, and you will ask German partner to be your key partner, he will open up a company for you, then it doesn't make much sense just because you are not sure of your future here. Any investment will be coming here to the Germany specifically when you are sure that you will be here for at least, let's say, 3-5 years. So the first thing you have to do is to make sure that you will be able to your government, your Ministry of Foreign Affairs will be able to give this, internal affairs will be able to give this long-term permissions. And Germany right now is really, really below the scale. It's below 1% of all the new residence permits in the EU. It's again below 1% in Germany, all entire the EU. So even Portugal is giving more. So but the second step is that we have to bring more events. So with this, I very much invite Ostausschuss and other business associations to do some business events, to come join us. Maybe let's have it once a year, some bigger event, bigger seminar, let's say bigger networking event where you could bring German companies and we could bring Belarusian companies. Even if there are 20 participants from Belarusian side, I think this would be, let's say, already a good representation for here. So let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. So let's keep it up after the discussion. I would like to open the floor now for questions to the audience. So I have 2 hands. Ladies first, if you agree, and then you. 3 hands, please. Please indicate who you are and ask your questions, and don't bring up a co-impulse, please.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Very interesting presentations, very interesting insights. Katya Glod, European Leadership Network. I have a question maybe to Lev and to Robert. Well, 2 related questions. So the first question is about Russia and Belarus and economic integration. What has been happening in this regard in terms of, any concrete steps that have been taken apart from, signing these 28 roadmaps or union programs back, 3 years ago. We have seen, for example, this harmonization of administrative tax, for example. Has there been taken anything similar to your knowledge, or anything else in more concrete steps? And second question is particularly with regard to military-industrial complex, how Belarus is helping Russian war machine. And I'm not now talking about, smuggling of parts, etc. And I think sanctions against Belarus and Russia are synchronized in terms of these high technology parts, but more in terms of using the Belarusian industrial base and its IT potential that has been there for years, like using, the electronics for planes, for example, chassis, for machines. I think in October there was again the information that there was another agreement signed on this military-industrial cooperation, and before we heard about about 140 million that was proposed for joint projects. So if you know anything about that, that would be also very good to hear. Thank you very much.
I would suggest that we just directly go to the panel. Robert, Lvovskiy.
There are 2 great questions, but the answer for both is more or less we don't know much. With regard to integration, so Russia now, it's hard to underestimate its role in the Belarusian economy. up to 70% of our international trade goes with Russia. And probably another 15% goes through Russia, or 20 even. With regard to some particular integration projects, the one that you mentioned about synchronization of administrative data on taxes is the most important. This is actually, it didn't play its role yet, but it gives Russia a very large potential to affect the Belarusian economy in future. So it's like a weapon that could be used. When it will be used and whether it will be used, we don't know. Yeah, and with regard to war production, all the data is of course hidden. We know that Belarus helps Russian war machine a lot with non-military production, such as military uniform and food, because somehow it happened that before the war somebody stole all Russian uniforms. It happens sometimes in Russia, so now Belarus, unfortunately, is making them. But more than that, we don't know much.
What do you know more?
No, unfortunately not. I can mainly also refer to what Les said. I mean, this lack of data is obviously especially pronounced in the military sphere, right, on both sides, Russia and Belarus. But as Belarus has a very strong industrial base, also in the vehicles part, lorries and so on, I think one can assume that there is some support for the Russian military, maybe not directly with weapons, but with lorries and whatever Russia needs for its war making. And Lev also mentioned uniforms and other stuff, so they are definitely supporting this as much probably as they can. In terms of integration, we haven't really seen the big integration steps, also like discussions about a common currency, I think, which would be really almost, I mean, then the country would more or less lose its economic sovereignty, right? If we would talk about that, and this is pretty much absent from the discussion so far as I see it. And we have also not really seen an increase of the influence of Russian oligarchs, which has been a topic for years, right? That Russia was sort of trying to buy the assets of some interesting companies in Belarus. I think the war, which created problems both for the Russian but also for the Belarusian side, probably put a stop on that. So, but I think it should be also watched whether in the future we see a sort of pressure again on Belarus to kind of privatize. I wouldn't call it privatize because it basically goes from one sort of state ownership to another form of state ownership. But this is probably a discussion that we could see in the future. But so far, it's largely absent from what we've been seeing.
Vladimir, Sierz, do you have some comments on this integration topic or military? The next question comes from you.
Yeah, my name is Sergey Pelesa. I'm from Belsat TV, and I have a question for Mr. Kirchner and Lev Lvovskiy. And let me ask this question in Belarusian. It's a kind of continuation of a question of Kati Gold. It's connected. Спадар Кірхнер, ви узгадали про те, що тепер у часі війни, я так зрозумів, павелічыўся гандаль аўтамабілямі з Нямецчыны ў Беларусь. Мы таксама заўважаем гэту з'яву. Як вы ацэньваеце, наколькі наогул змянілася структура гандлю паміж Нямецчынай і Беларусю у выніку вайны? Што это за гандаль? Якія тавары ідуць у Беларусь? І ці гэта не з'яўляецца абыходам заходніх, у тым ліку нямецкіх санкцый, прымяненых супраць рэжыму Улadzимира Путина у адказ на агрэсію супраць Украіны? І калі гэта так, то ці патрэбная рэакцыя больш рашучая з боку Нямецчыны, напрыклад, на тое, што рэжым Лукашэнкі дапамагае Расіі абыходзіць санкцыі заходнюю супраць Расіі? Дякую.
Thank you. So, Robert, Lviv. I always say Lviv. Lev?
Yeah, maybe now I start and then you can add. So basically, I would not necessarily say that we're seeing contradictions to sanctions. I mean, I would say by and large, companies do abide by the sanctions regimes, and we've seen a decrease in those items that are sanctioned. We've also seen a decrease in imports from Belarus on also again on goods which are sanctions, but there are many goods which are not sanctions, yeah, like pharmaceutical products, chemical products, and so on. And here we've seen not the decline, or not the decline to the same extent. And in the case of automotives, and I'm talking here about the European level because we looked at European data, I said that in the beginning, we have seen an increase, and we think that could be due to the fact that there is a circumvention. Again, companies deliver this to Belarus. They are claiming they're having their client there. And then what happens afterwards, whether they stay, these goods stay in the country or being shipped to Russia, that's a second story. I agree, one should look into this more closely and try to close loopholes, because I mean, we should make sure that our sanctions versus Russia get the intended impact. And if we have like many loopholes, then obviously it doesn't happen. But it's not just a discussion with Belarus, it's also with many other countries in the region. Yeah, I mean, Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, whatever, Kazakhstan, this is a similar questions where we should have I would say a common approach to them, right? This is not just looking at one country, this is looking on the problem in general. So, but again, really kind of that companies are really going against sanctions. I think it definitely happens also, and there have been also reports in the German press, but I would say more individual cases of like bad behavior of certain companies, and of course there should be sanctions. But I would not say this is a kind of what we see in the data as a broad base that it runs against the sanctions.
Well, I would split your question into toxicity avoidance and sanction avoidance. For example, the situation with the cars that you mentioned, cars are not under sanctions. There were many companies which exited the Russian market to avoid international toxicity, to make a public statement that they are not there anymore. But then many of them, some of them started to continue their exports to Russia through Kyrgyzstan, through Belarus, through other jurisdictions. So it is not that they're breaking any sanctions. It is, well, they are avoiding this toxicity in a sense. They are breaking their own promises, not the laws. That's the first part. Second part is the actual sanctions avoidance and breaking the laws. There, I would first of all look at microelectronics and microchips. These are the most important sanctioned goods which reach both Belarus and Russia. We can guess with high degree of certainty that they do reach Belarus and Russia, and that there is sanction avoidance, because without them, well, some rockets would not fly, or some buses will catch fire, as it, for example, happened in the very beginning of the war when Belarusian electrobuses started to catch fire. This is exactly what you expect when sanctions work, when you replace one microchip with another, because then things start to blow up. But nowadays, Belarusian machinery does not catch fire. So we can guess that they're getting original parts, first of all, microelectronics. There were some journalist investigations, for example, like with Latvian company, which was selling which before the war was selling microchips to Russia, but after the war they were selling exactly the same configurations of microchips to some unknown company in China, and that unknown company in China was selling to Russia. So such sanctions avoidance, it's much harder to spot. Of course, companies which do that, they know that they're doing it, but it's harder for national governments to spot them because, well, yeah, it's just things are going to China. That is fine. Nothing is breaking down. Yeah, so there is problem. Well, first, not just problem in terms of economic sanctions, but also problem in terms of the war, because, for example, with Russia uses some of these would-be sanctioned goods to create weapons that they use in Ukraine. But yeah, and that's a serious problem. But meanwhile, nothing is done, or I don't know of any serious instruments that European politicians are thinking about like using to avoid this.
Thank you. So we have two further questions. One is from you and one is from you. So please.
Паколькі палітычныя працэсы, бізнес-працэсы ці больш шырока эканамічныя працэсы шчыльна звязаныя, я хацеў бы задаць два пытання. На працягу дзесяткаў гадоў, вось пакуль існуе аўтарытарны рэжым у Беларусі, увесь час эканамісты, спецыялісты іншага профілю прадказвалі крах беларускай эканомікі з-за яе неэфектыўнасці. Але такого краху не наступіла. Гэтыя размовы узмацніліся, калі былі ўведзены больш ці менш сістэмныя санкцыі, што гэта нясе непапраімую шкоду беларускай эканомікі, і гэта прывядзе к палітычным зменам. Ні аднаго, ні другога не адбылося. У сувязі з гэтым і першае пытанне. Ці сапраўды можна чакаць пасля ўвядзення санкцыяў, што беларуская эканоміка сёння ці заўтра пацерпіць такі крах? І другое пытанне, вось яно ідзе асобна, гэта ці магчыма чакаць ад беларускага бізнеса падтрымкі палітычнага транзіта ў Беларусі? Ці падтрымкі такого палітычнага транзіту?
Thank you very much for the two questions.
May I start with the first one?
Oh yeah, of course.
So the first one is actually quite easy. The issue is in your definition of what represents economic failure. If we would close our eyes and think what country represents an economic failure, probably like North Korea would be one of such examples. North Korea is a super poor country. Everybody are very poor there. They even don't eat enough calories, everything else. Now, what's North Korea? North Korea is an economy which grows on average at 1% per year during the last 50 years. So even the amount of sanctions and the amount of anti-market policies that you observe in North Korea, together with modern technological progress, gives this country opportunity to grow at 1% per year. So North Korea is poor not because it had some economic catastrophe, not because it went down. It looks poor for us just because all of us are much richer. So poverty nowadays is relative, not absolute. It is practically impossible to have long-run decline in the economy. I don't know any such country except Democratic Republic of Congo, probably. At least for the last, let's say, 50 years. So countries that we call poor, they are poor because not because they're declining, they're growing. They're growing at lower rates. This is the case with Belarus. We can look at our neighbors, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia. These are the countries which were on the same level of GDP per capita in 1990s, even in the middle of 1990s. Nowadays, we see that each of these countries is 2 to 3 times richer than Belarus. This is an effect of current Belarusian economic policy. It is stagnation. We are not declining, we are growing not as fast, and as a result, we observe Poland, which is 2.5 times richer. We observe technologies, businesses, people are some moving to Poland, and if in 1991 it would sound like a weird story that somebody decided to go from Belarus to Poland, because the question would be why. There was nothing better. Nowadays, people don't ask questions when somebody goes from Belarus to Poland because it's clear, well, Poland is a richer country with a higher potential. So our future right now is not decline, it's stagnation.
So thank you. We have still the question, the future of the Belarusian business model. The question, by the way, we just thought about to discuss on the panel anyhow. So thank you very much. And maybe the other topic is, could we expect from Belarusian entrepreneurs or economic stakeholders, I guess, in the country, if they contribute to political change? Who wants to contribute, please? Sierz, you took the mic.
I can go. So my very brief answer is yes. Tak. I don't want to go into the details because it's a touchy issue and we can discuss it in the after this panel. But this is why I highlighted Belarusian business in Europe, in the EU today is institutionalized, is important. Because we can treat ourselves as diaspora, business diaspora. We can say, oh, this is Belarusian business diaspora, like Armenian diaspora, like Jewish diaspora, like, I don't know, Croatian or Serbian in the EU. So we can say, look, we are here, and the more we grow here, the more we will be, let's say, feeling ourselves in diaspora, the more impact there will be in the future. And this, I'm absolutely sure on this. So my answer is yes.
Someone else to react?
Yeah, maybe just to the first point on this collapse or whatever, and I just want to reiterate what Lev said. I mean, it is not, it is very unlikely that we see a decline, a sudden decline, but what we see is stagnation. And this is really painful if we look over a longer period of time. And maybe we say now, okay, that means we will have every year the same amount of output and development. But I mean, think in terms of different generations, right? I mean, your children, they will come to the world, have already much less than neighboring Poland, which had same starting points some 30 years back. And looking now ahead, they will probably leave this world and give it to their children at the same level again that they inherited it. So there's zero development. And you know that at the same time in neighboring countries, left and right, people are getting richer, the wealth goes up. And this is, in my view, the true tragedy. It's not that we are thinking that tomorrow the world is over. No, I mean, you will probably have the same sort of output generating somehow, but this is not the point. The point is really you're losing actually the future.
We have 1, 2, 4 people and 10 minutes left only. I guess we start, if you really can focus on a question so that we can take a last round from the audience.
Okay, Kamil Kusiński, again, Center for Eastern Studies Poland. I will have one question to Lvovskiy, but also a very short comment on sanctions, because main challenge on sanctions, looking, for example, from Polish perspective, is to fight, to stop, to limit alternative export or import. It depends from which point of view we look. For example, last year we observed very fast growth of import of Kyrgyz and Kazakh wood and coal. Of course, we understand, we are not so stupid. We understand that both countries, I've been there, they are very nice, but they don't produce so much coal and wood, of course. But we have to prove that. Formally, we have to prove that. And it's a very painful and long process, very bureaucratic, believe me. So it's not that, that Poland is blind or European Union is blind, but this is also, everything is based on law. Should be based on law, in law civilization, as we used to call ourselves. And my question is about your anecdote about little child, electricity, this electric socket. Sooner or later, this electricity will come, will hit this child. So what can be this electricity for Belarusian economy and Belarusian regime in economic sphere? The most painful thing.
Thank you very much. Keep your answer in mind. Since you are on. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So looking on the number of female representatives on this panel, as an annoying person, I would like to ask something about gender equality. So do you know about any data like about gender wage gap in Belarus, about this tendency, is it increasing? And one additional question to Sierz about like, what is with gender equality among Belarusian business abroad? How many female representatives do you have, and which additional challenges women have in opening business abroad? Thank you.
We have first the lady. Yeah.
Yes, hi, I just have a reflection. Can I now? Yeah, right? Okay, my name is Angelika Melnikova. I work at National Anti-Crisis Management, and this is just a small reflection. I'm sitting here and listening to experts, and I feel really proud of what I hear. And this great job that is made by Association of Belarusian Business Abroad and by the experts, by BEROC and iSANS. And I think that not many stakeholders, our partners, international partners, and especially people inside of Belarus know about this job. And the topic of our conference is raising the Belarusian voice in Europe. So I think that in terms of economics, this must be the voice either of political institutions and business associations and economic community representatives, experts. And this is not about uniting. I think that Mr. Anatol Lebedka said a great thing today on the first panel, that this shouldn't be uniting. We are already united, but this should be a uniting of our efforts. So it is impossible to unite everyone, and it's even useless, but we have to act and move forward having one vector. And today we have everything for that. We have a great infrastructure, great experts, great hubs, and economic community, but we just maybe need some institution or a manager or a team to win this information war, actually to show on a global scene what we are already doing, what is the social economic impact of Belarusian business abroad, what is Belarusian business inside of Belarus, and also we have to raise our voices not only globally but first of all inside of Belarus. What I know is that there are, some analytics say that there are from 240,000 to 500,000 micro and small and medium-sized businesses inside of Belarus right now. So we have to win the minds of this economically active community. We need to show them the alternative, because we do need some positive agenda. We're always saying how bad it is in Belarus, but okay, they know it very well for sure themselves. They live there and they work there, but our people must know that they are of the highest value, that they are the highest value. And it's not a secret that developed countries rely on small and medium-sized businesses to a large extent. So we have to show them that they are of such a big value and offer a vision and a strategy and the reforms regarding the improvement of investment climate in Belarus and improvement of priority partnerships and development on the basis of European principles and practices. So, as I said, this is an information war. Maybe representative on economics in the United Transitional Cabinet could be such a person or a team of managers that could just, manage all these human resources, financial resources to help this economic community to empower them, not to create the agenda, but to collect information, challenges, ideas, and so on that are inside of this economic community, and to transmit and advocate these ideas in Europe and globally, in US and wherever, and of course inside of Belarus. I come from big business. I have big business background, and very often we were talking about strategy. That's not a secret. I used to work for Coca-Cola Hellenic bottling company, and our CEO was also asking, "What is strategy?" And the young leaders were like, how to say it in simple words. And he was like, look at the initial sense definition of strategy. This is about how to win the war. This is the initial definition. And this is the war for people's mindset. And if we now act and unite our efforts and further work together under some umbrella, then I think that we will win this war for prosperous and European Belarus. Thank you so much. Thank you for this platform and for this forum. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I guess on the final round on the panel, I guess someone will reflect on what you said. It's very important. The last question for the second panel, and then we will have the closing round here in the front.
Thank you, Stefan. I'll try to be short. Olga Randova, Arbeitskreis Belarus. I have a question to Sierz. I think you've already partly answered it, but just to make it more clear for me also to understand and also get some questions here in German about it. So under Belarusian business, you primarily understand business with Belarusian capital abroad, not in Belarus. Are those only entities that left Belarus after 2020? So do we, maybe in other words to say, when does Belarusian business for you stops to be Belarusian, taking into consideration that they work in other countries, they pay taxes in other countries? So is there any point where you would say, no, it's not Belarusian, or is it more or less a political project of Belarusian business diaspora? I think you already partly answered the question that could be political in the future. And in this connection, also second part of the question, on your website, you have the office of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya as a partner of this association. So is it any kind of criteria for your members or for people you help that they share that they support the office, that they share the views? Are there any businesses that left the country but do not support certain political parties, or not parties, actors, and thus do not take part in your activities? So how should we understand this entity of association? Is it a political project? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So last round here on the panel on sanctions and complexity. Someone who takes it on data on the wage gap in Belarus, gender equality, positive agenda, and the question on ABBA. Maybe I guess Sierz can answer that at it best, but maybe start with Lev and then just going on the panel.
So the answer to Camille, so there is nothing new, like humanity lived with inflation for many years. If you control prices for too long, then you have deficit, like in Soviet Union. That was example of country which control prices for so long. If you control them but then stop, then you don't have problems with output, but you have problem with hyperinflation. We already had it in Belarus when, like the previous time, when Lukashenko started to believe that he is god of economics, we had to get rid of 4 zeros in our currency. So one of the two. With regards to gender wage gap, so we don't have the good data, because the good data, to answer your question precisely, we need household survey, which was conducted only before the political crisis. But I can give you an educated guess that gender wage gap in Belarus has actually decreased during the last couple of years. There are two reasons for that. First, overall, there was a decrease in inequality between Minsk and other regions of Belarus, and there are more women in other regions of Belarus, just happens. And the second reason is that there was disproportional outflow of IT people who were bringing like big chunk of Belarusian inequality. And in Belarusian IT, there are also more men than women. So once these many IT people outflow the country, presumably, I would guess that gender pay gap decreased, although not for good reasons. It decreased not because women became richer, it's rather that men's salaries grew by less.
Yeah, briefly also on the sanctions issue that Kamil referred to. I mean, one discussion is always about sanctions, what kind of sanctions, but then once you decide on that, and it's hard enough, you need to think about the implementation. And as soon as you actually introduce them, then there will be loopholes created by companies, and a lot of these usually you were not aware of when you were introducing them. So this is always a cat and mouse game, and it will never stop. And my impression is that as EU or the West in general needs to put much more effort into sanctions compliance. And obviously we always want new sanctions to increase the pressure and so on, but I think really making those that we have already introduced, make them sort of watertight or try to really make them effective, I think this will take a bigger and growing share of our time, or the time of the people that are dealing with that.
Well, thanks for the question in women entrepreneurs. Among our members, we have 40% of women businesses, which is super cool, I guess. It's almost half. And we try to bring it in more as much as we can. And we have a special women business club, which brings together different directions of women business networking. But this is not enough of the data that I have. I can tell you that when we made a research of the general entrepreneurial potential of Belarusians abroad, we had such kind of survey on February this year, 2023. And we discovered that 18% of all Belarusians are already entrepreneurs. Either they have, individual sole proprietorship, self-employed, or they have a company. 18%, 10. For women, this number, of course, is lower. It's 12% only. So among women, there's already 12% of Belarusian women already have been into business, which I, again, assume is a normal outcome just because it's normal in Belarus itself. If you look at, let's say, global entrepreneurship monitoring, then normally in Belarus, the women entrepreneurial potential is lower than in general, than average, and is lower than men's. So I would expect it as normal. But but most interesting thing is that we found out that among the 100% of Belarusians, there are potential entrepreneurs who would like to start a business, not already have, but would like. And men have 30% of them who would like to start a business, and women twice less, 15% only. So let's say it exists, it's there, so we have to nurture it and make it even more institutionalized. We try to do it. And regarding the question about ABBA specifically, I will be very short. ABBA has nothing to do with Office of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya officially. We are absolutely independent and way far from their political agenda. We have no political agenda at all. They are our partner, as well as, let's say, our Ostausschuss is our partner, and they're also on the website. And there are many other partners that we've been working with. I don't know, donors, our ecosystem partners like Imaguru. So many of them, journalists, Belsat or any other. So whoever it is we're working with, we are in partnership. So yeah, we have been cooperating in some way. Of course, you have to understand that if we try to advocate the interests of business, if I'm coming up to a government, let's say in Latvia, well, Latvia, no, you cannot come because it's a bad case. Let's say in Estonia, where you still can come and go and see, then you have to represent a voice. And if this voice is supported by some political will, then this voice is much much easier heard, right? So we try to get this kind of somewhere support of this, but it's only the matter of our partnership. It's not a matter of any legal background and any legal dependence on our relationship. And the last question was about the how do we treat Belarusian business to be Belarusian business? We treat as statistically as the Belarusian beneficiary among the shareholders. So this is our, as a researcher, I must admit that this is the limitation. If this business in statistics has a Belarusian, let's say, owner or beneficiary, then we treat it as Belarusian. But in reality, the truth is different. Only 2/3 of them, according to our survey again, they treat themselves as Belarusian. Only 2/3. And most common answer is that the answer is dependent on whom they're working with. If this is a Belarusian client and they work with some Belarusian company, then they treat themselves as Belarusian. If they're working with, let's say, Polish or German company, then they say, no, we're not Belarusian, we are Estonian, we are whatever it is. So it depends. In real life, I know companies who are participating they're Belarusian, they're big, but they're participating on behalf of the National Investment Supporting Agency, let's say in Saudi Arabia on the Expo, as in, let's say, Estonian company. So life is different, it's difficult.
Thank you. Vladimir, do you want to share? Okay. Then, since we are a bit over time, sorry for cutting your break a bit. I thank you very much for the very fruitful insights of Vladimir, Sierz, Naurodski, Robert Kirchner, and Lvovskiy. So maybe you can give them a hand for the insights. Thank you very much. Thank you. And as I informed, there will be break until 3:30, officially and unofficially. So please be back here at 3:30. Thank you very much.